Hey math lovers, Miss Amber here again. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Today we're going to be talking about simplifying radicals. So the key to simplifying radicals is finding perfect square factors that fit into those values. So if you can find a perfect square factor, then you could square root that factor. But what's a perfect square? Well, remember, a perfect square is the result of multiplying a number by itself. So for example, 5 times 5 is 25. That means that 25 is a perfect square because it's the result of multiplying a number 5 times itself. So other numbers that would be perfect squares are numbers like 49 because that's 7 times 7, or 100 because that's 10 times 10, or even 169 is a perfect square because that comes from 13 times 13. So anytime you take a whole number, multiply it by itself, the result is going to be a perfect square. So those types of numbers like 25, 36, 49, so on and so forth are the types of factors that you want to try to find in your radical numbers when you're trying to simplify them. So the easiest way to explain it is by looking at an example. So let's think about the square root of 80. I want to simplify the square root of 80. The first thing I have to ask myself is, well, is there a perfect square that actually fits into the number 80? Yes, there is. 16 fits into 80. And I know that because 16 times 5 equals 80. So I'm going to break that square root of 80 into the square root of 16 and the square root of 5. So now that 16 is a perfect square, I can actually take the square root of that number. So the square root of 16 is 4 because 4 times 4 makes 16. So that now puts the 4 on the outside. So anytime you actually square root a value, it's now outside of the radical. But the 5, that's not a perfect square. So it has to stay underneath the radical because I can't take the square root of that. So the simplified version of the square root of 80 is going to be 4 rad 5. So what if you couldn't think about 16 as the perfect square? Some people might think about 4 as the perfect square that fits into 80. And it absolutely does because 4 times 20 makes 80. So you can also start with smaller perfect squares. You'll just have to keep breaking the radical down a couple of times to make sure you simplify it fully. So say I started with the 4. Well, then I'm going to rewrite the square root of 80 as the square root of 4 times the square root of 20. So now I take the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. So that turns the square root of 80 into 2 rad 20. But now I also have to recognize that the square root of 20 still has a perfect square factor, which is another 4. So now I have to write the square root of 20 as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. And now when I square root that 4, it turns into 2 rad 5. So now we have 2 2's on the outside and a 5 underneath the radical. So what do we do with those 2's on the outside? Well, we multiply them. So 2 times 2 makes 4, and again you can see you got to the same answer, 4 rad 5. So remember, it doesn't matter which perfect square you start with, just keep simplifying until you can't find any more. Hope that helps you simplify some radicals. See you next time.